What is up, guys? In today's video, I'm going to be going over several tips to hopefully help you stop losing to the Kneecapper Bat, or at least lose to it less in Chapter 6 Season 2. As always, if you guys do find this video to be helpful, informative, interesting, remember to give it a like, subscribe if you'd like to see more, and comment down below how you approach playing against this bat. So, for starters, let's just talk about what the bat has. It has two different attacks. It has the regular attack and the charged attack. Of these, I think the regular attack is really not that problematic, and it's pretty easy to play against, and it's very counterable. The charge attack is what I think people really struggle with, and where the main problem lies with dealing with this weapon. So for starters, the most obvious piece of advice when it comes to dealing with any sort of melee weapon in Fortnite is going to be just to not be in melee range of an enemy. With the nature of this game, though, there's times where you kind of have to, whether that's like the circle shrinking, somebody catching you off guard because they're hiding, or just somebody jumping on you. Like, there will be times where you have to be close to enemies, but limiting how much that is happening will go a long way in limiting your deaths to this bat. And just try your best to not get in that situation versus somebody that has full health. Like, if you just, and this is always true, but if an enemy has full HP and you just jump on them, that's often not going to be ideal, and that's more of like a 50-50 fight. But if you're able to open up with AR damage on people, in this season we have two incredible ARs with the Hollow Twister AR and the Striker Burst. We also have a Sniper, which is pretty good, and the Mammoth Pistol. So if you're able to get good damage on an enemy from like medium range with those items and then push them, that's much more likely to work out for you than just jumping on them with no initial tags. Not only do you put pressure on the enemy and you kind of potentially make them panic, but since they're weaker, that fight isn't going to last as long, so you're not allowing them as much time to get damage off with their melee weapon, right? So don't force those close range fights if you don't have to. The flip side of this is that an enemy will try to hop on you at times. Like, we've all played against those people who play as if the bat is the only item in the game. The enemies will try to just jump on you dry sometimes. So if you recognize that that is happening, try to use mobility to escape. Like, shockwaves are great for this. I've seen a lot of situations where it's pretty obvious a bat person is pushing somebody, but they just decide to stand their ground and just shoot at the person as they approach them. And sometimes that can work if you have good aim and get good damage in time. But if you don't hit those shots, you're probably just going to lose. And so repositioning proactively with shockwaves, I think, would help a lot in that situation. Just recognizing that, like, hey, this probably isn't going to go my way, or this is more risky than it needs to be, I'm going to shockwave out of here. That little realization can really help you versus these melee weapons. The Gold Rush effect that was added this season can also be really, really helpful in dealing with the melee weapons. I wish this negated fall damage like Nitro did, but it doesn't. But the main reason why this is going to help you versus the melee weapons is it makes you sprint faster, so you can maybe get away from them easier. But also, if you sprint into somebody while you have Gold Rush, you kind of knock them back away from you. And I'm not sure if I've just been really lucky whenever I've tried to use the Gold Rush, but every time someone has been charging a bat and like coming towards me, and then I just Gold Rush sprint into them, I've knocked them back before they were able to get the swing off in time, and then I just don't get affected by their bat at all. And like I was kind of talking about earlier, if you sprint into the enemy and knock them back, not only are you no longer in melee range of them, but you've made that fight more difficult for them than it needs to be, and potentially kind of like thrown them off. You can spray them as, you know, you knock them back. Potentially you cause them fall damage if you're on like a mountain or something. Or you could just take the fact that you've knocked them back and then shockwave away and reposition and make it more of a ranged fight like we talked about. So having the Gold Rush ability really helps versus these melee weapons. In a bad situation, you can just kind of sprint into them, knock them back, and then hopefully get out of there, or just get the kill. I like to carry the gold splashes as my healing item. It's definitely my favorite healing item this season. The Fletcher Cane medallion can also be attained by eliminating the Fletcher Cane boss, and this gives you unlimited Gold Rush while sprinting. You don't have every aspect of Gold Rush, but you'll have this knockback effect at all times, which is very good. So I really like getting that medallion just because I like having it, but having it as like a potential counter to the melee weapons is very nice. Another thing that can go a long way in countering melee weapons is going to be cars, and I've felt this way ever since we've kind of had melee weapons within Fortnite. Cars allow you to travel around the map a little bit quicker. They give you cover. But in a situation where you're dealing with a melee player, you could just get in the car and potentially throw them off. Like, the bat can hit through the car, but it really depends on where the enemy is in relation to the car and the angle they have. It's not like anytime they hit the car, they're going to deal damage to you. The way I kind of look at it is, if you're on the ground and the enemy is in melee range, it's a guaranteed hit. They're just going to hit you if they swing, right? But if you get in the car, maybe they hit you, maybe they don't, but at least it is like a chance to avoid that melee damage, you know? It's not going to work 100% of the time, but if you're avoiding 50% of the attacks, that's situations where you maybe went out. So just being around a car whenever you're dealing with these melee weapons, I think is very good. Also, if you're in a car, you don't get fall damage if you're in the car, and that will really matter for the charged effect. The charge effect can like send your car flying, but again, what is better? Being on the ground and getting sent to a fall damage death, or being on the ground and getting your car flung and being immune to that fall damage because you get in the car? Like, obviously, being in the car and avoiding that fall is nice, so I really want to be around a car whenever I'm fighting this season, and I felt the same way last season with the katana. Like, the katana would hit through the car sometimes, but just being able to avoid that fall damage was a huge deal. Also, just staying calm really helps versus these melee weapons. This is true with any fight you get in the game. If you're able to stay calm and not panic, you're probably going to play better. But I feel like versus these melee weapons, a lot of people panic, they feel rushed, and then they just kind of like make the fight harder for themselves than they need to. So try to stay calm. Obviously, me just saying try to stay calm doesn't really do anything for you. But if you can help it, or at least kind of consciously think about that, I think that will help you win fights versus these melee weapons. So now with that basic stuff out of the way, let's get into some more detailed tips for dealing with the actual attacks of this weapon. As I said before, it has two attacks, the regular melee and the charged attack. The regular melee I don't think is really that big of a deal at all. And if I was fighting somebody in this game, I would like nothing more for them to just try to use the regular melee of this weapon on me. To beat this, pretty much all you have to do is stand still and shoot your spray weapon at the person meleeing you, and you should win that fight. The melee weapon regular attacks rarely have the greatest DPS, so if they're just going to sit there and swing on you, you can spray your AR, SMG, whatever you have. You're probably going to hit every shot because you're very close to them, and you should win out on that trade. If they have the gold rush effect, it will make them swing faster, so there's times where you can lose, but more often than not, if you do this, you will win the fight. When you stand still, your character doesn't get knocked around as much from the regular melee attack of these items. And this has been true with like every melee weapon in the game for the most part. So the problem really lies is that a lot of people try to use their movement to avoid the hits and then make the fight for themselves actually harder than it needs to be. And potentially using shotguns. I'll open up with my pump, but I don't want to be like actively swapping back and forth when dealing with these melee weapons. I'd rather just stand on the spray, sit still, spray them out, and you'll win the fight. And that's kind of why I said like being calm really helps, because in these situations, you kind of need to just accept you're getting melee spammed and that you will win out in the long run. So I think the regular melee is really not that big of a deal, and just standing still and taking it and spraying them works most of the time. It even works versus the Sub-Zero ones as well. The real problem is going to lie in the charged attack. This is what does the most damage, and this is also what the most threatening part of the Typhoon Blade was. All of last season, I saw comments of people being like, how can anyone complain about the Typhoon Blade? It's not that good. And I'd agree if you're playing against people using the regular attack, but if you play against good players using the charge effect, it is a problem and it is difficult to deal with. This is going to be really problematic in any area where you can take fall damage and just like straight up die that way. But also, good players using this charge attack will often charge attack you, send you flying, swap to their AR or mammoth pistol after they've sent you flying, and then just like spray you or shoot you out of the air, and you just take so much damage so fast, and there's not really much of an opportunity to respond, and you potentially just take that fall damage. So the charged effect is what's really problematic with both of the recent melee items, I think. Unfortunately, the bat does not have an attack that allows you to negate fall damage. With the Typhoon Blade, if you were in the air, you could do the downward attack or, you know, the regular attack while you're in the air, and this would negate you from fall damage. That is not the case with the bat. You can't use the bat's attacks to avoid fall damage, at least as of now. Maybe they'll change that at some point. But that is one of the more problematic things about the bat being in the loot pool, is that it doesn't counter itself like how the Typhoon Blade did. One thing that will counter this fall damage and make you immune to fall damage is going to be the Sub-Zero gauntlets. If you use the slide ability of the Sub-Zero gauntlets when you're in the air, you won't take fall damage. So if you hate dealing with fall damage and you're tired of getting sent to your death, maybe running the Sub-Zero gauntlets can help you out with that. I don't enjoy these as much of as a mobility item as I do like shocks and the bat, so I really don't like carrying them. But I will have times where, like, let's say a zone is ending on a mountain and I have access to the gauntlets, I'll maybe take it at that point. Like, if I know I'm in a really problematic scenario and I'm forced into that problematic scenario, where the bat would be really, really good, then I will consider taking Sub-Zero gauntlets, but it's not really something I enjoy carrying all the time. If you're able to get in a car, you may take damage from the regular swing or the charge attack, but at least you will be immune to that fall damage, as I kind of said earlier. So being around a car and having a car with you can really help. Avoid fighting on mountains whenever possible. If you don't have to, I would want to not force a fight on a mountain. And this is easier said than done because there's a lot of mountains on the Chapter 6 map. And there's a lot of zones that will end on mountains. So you will have games where you're just forced into this. But as I kind of said earlier, being aware of that can help you a lot. So if I am going to be on a zone that's forcing me to end on mountains, I'm more likely to take the Sub-Zero gauntlets. I really would like to have a car with me. That way I could potentially avoid that fall damage. And I'm probably going to try to actively just avoid getting close to anybody at all. Or, you know, proactively shockwaving away like I talked about earlier if an enemy is trying to like force a fight on me. So whenever you're on a mountain, be very aware of the fact that you can get cheese to fall damage. You can also try to stand in a location where the knockback would be less detrimental. If you have your back to like some sort of structure and then they do this, they might not send you flying. There's a chance they break the structure and then you just go anyways. But a lot of this comes down to minimizing risk. So if you are able to, you know, get your back to like a tree or a rock or a building or something, that can really help. Also, standing in a spot where maybe you don't get sent as far. Like, if you could stand on the top of the mountain and then you just get sent to your death, that kind of sucks. But if you're able to, like, get on the other side of them, that way if they do the charge, it's not as detrimental. Something like that could also save your life in these situations. It really just depends where the enemy is and then trying to position yourself in such a way where the knockback isn't as big of a deal. Also, if I am fighting somebody that I know really wants to use the bat, I really like trying to get them to fight me indoors, because if you're indoors in a building, the knockback charged attack isn't going to send you as far, which is great. But this is also oftentimes going to encourage the enemy to use the regular melee attack. And as I kind of talked about before, as far as threat goes, I don't think the regular melee is much of a threat. I feel like the regular melee is like a 2 out of 10 threat. And then the charged effect can potentially be a 10 out of 10 given the right situation. So if you're able to get indoors, you really reduce how effective that charge is going to be and kind of incentivize them to use the regular attack, which is less effective. So if you are able to get indoors, I think that really helps versus the melee weapons. But that is going to be it for this video. Hopefully you guys found it to be helpful, informative, interesting. Unfortunately, there's not as many things to counter fall damage this season. It really just comes down to maybe having the Sub-Zero gauntlets in those situations, or better yet, just not being in them altogether, which is hard to say in Fortnite because the nature of a battle royale is you don't always get to control, you know, how the fights start or where the fights are happening. But if you enjoyed this, give it a like, subscribe if you'd like to see more. Let me know what you guys think of the Kneecapper Bat down in the description or down in the comments below, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching.